All right, everybody, I guess we might as well get started. Attendance is really dropping off this week in these Zoom calls. I don't know if it's because it's getting tougher with all the classes meeting multiple times per week or what. I'm trying my best to alleviate that for this class, but maybe that's not happening all over the place. I know it's early morning class, but just a reminder that if you don't make it for the live Zoom classes, we only have one per week, so do go and watch the videos. I do record the main part of, I don't record like when people are coming in or at the end when people are asking questions, but in the middle part, I do record that so that anybody who's not here can go and watch it on the YouTube playlist. Every class period is there. So you can get up to speed if you're not able to make it to class. But good morning, everybody. Those of you who are here. This week, I'm in the Blackboard. This week, we're going to be starting to read Oedipus Rex by Sophocles. I don't think that that's a surprise to anybody. We've been gearing up for it. So this week, we'll have the first half of the play, and next week, we'll have the second half of the play. The objectives have to do with developing analytical reading skills and analyzing works of drama. And then we can move on to the updates. A few different things for updates. Number one, this is an A week, so you do not need to do a formative on Friday. Even though I make the Friday ones, I try to make them kind of easy or slash fun, whatever. But you just have today's and you have Thursdays. They're going to be focused on Oedipus and Greek drama. This is the beginning of the third 6 weeks. Yesterday was the first day of the third 6 weeks. I think that the third 6 weeks is only 5 weeks long, and I think it's going to seem even shorter because that 5th week is exam week. So we have 2 weeks right now before Thanksgiving, and when we get back from Thanksgiving, it's the first week of December already. So we have 2 weeks and then exams. So I don't know if many of your instructors are going to do reviews or that kind of thing, or have a dead week before exams. But the 6 weeks is shorter than usual. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about what you want your overall semester grade to be. Now's the time to do the final things that help you prepare for that in your classes. Hybrid schedule, we're on the same schedule this week as last week, but next week it's supposed to shift again, because next week is the week that anybody who wants to do hybrid, remember that hybrid is coming to the school building 2 days a week. The other 3 days are asynchronous. I guess there was some students, I don't know if they're freshmen or what, who were thinking that if they did hybrid, they'd only have to do school for 2 days and they were off on the other 3 days, but that's not how it works. So you still have to keep up with your classes virtually on the other 3 days. But for the students who want to come back and do hybrid, Monday the 16th is the first day that they can do that. They're supposed to be contacting you. If you did not do the survey that selected hybrid, then you will not be allowed to come onto the campus for hybrid. You can't just decide to do hybrid. So you can decide if you chose hybrid to just stay at home, however. I think most people are sticking with virtual, at least through the end of the semester. But the schedule is going to change next week. They haven't officially put it out yet, but I asked for it because I have some conferences in one of my other classes that I'm trying to set up one-on-one conferences with the students on their projects. And so I asked for the schedule, and I have it here, but I can't share it with you. Ooh, that's super, super top secret stuff. But I will tell you that it goes back to basically the schedule that we had before spring break. So it's more like a block schedule. And the way that they have it is that there's an hour of synchronous time each class period, followed by about, that has to be a typo, about a half an hour of asynchronous time. And then it goes from 8:10 in the morning until 3:55. So the periods are going to be longer. and you won't have that time at the end of the day that's, you know, like from 2:45 until 4 where the teachers are available for you and all that stuff. So it's going back to a more of a regular block schedule. I don't know if they're planning on changing it a little bit, but as soon as I have official word on that, then I'll send it out to you. I like to do announcements on Google Classroom because I think most people have their notifications on for that. So I'll send that out to you. Just a reminder that there's 9 days until Thanksgiving break. I don't know about you, but I'm thinking of hibernating. I do not plan to make an assignment for you over Thanksgiving break. I will talk about the research paper and make that assignment for, it's due in December, but I will make the assignment before we go on Thanksgiving break, but I'm not going to make the paper due right when we get back from Thanksgiving break. So you don't have to work on it over spring break, but it'll be there in case you do have time and you want to do it. We'll have the 2 weeks when we get back. We'll be finished with the play already, and we'll be able to focus on the paper and the exam. But I'm not going to give assignments or make you do questions or anything like that over Thanksgiving. I think we all need a week of downtime. I hope that your other instructors do the same thing. I don't have any control over their decision making, but I don't know. I'm exhausted. So I'm thinking, you know, everybody's just in that place where a week off or a month off would be good, but we only have a week. So the countdown begins. The poetry explication projects were good. I have graded them in Blackboard and I put extensive comments. It took me a while because I watched them all, and there are, 45 of you, and everybody made about a 10-minute video, but I watched each one of them twice. Once I went through and I made notes myself, and then I went through and watched it again and put in my comments for you. You'll see 2 grades when you look at your returned document. I don't know, when I return the assignment to you on Blackboard, however it comes, there'll be 2 grades. There'll be one for your project, which is a major grade, and then one for your reactions and commentary on your classmates' projects. And that one I have to make another column in the Blackboard. There are 2 columns in the second 6 weeks in the East on the portal, but when I was grading those in the discussion board, it only gave me 1 grade opening. And so I put the project grade in there. I'm going to go back and put another column and enter your peer commentary grade, the same one that you already have, into a column so that that grade also counts for the STC grade. I'll probably do that this afternoon or tomorrow. So I just couldn't do it at the same time that I was grading them because it wouldn't give me 2 columns, but Blackboard's weird like that. But overall, I think the projects were well done. I read a lot of the same poems. A lot of people chose the exact same poems, so it was interesting to see the different perspectives that people had on them. Most people did quite well. I was impressed with them. Some people didn't really follow the directions, and that was a little less impressive, but overall, I think that they were great. I hope that you enjoyed looking at the ways that your other classmates decided to do their project. I think it's always interesting. You do your project and turn it in and get a grade, but I like to give you an opportunity, or sort of force you to look at your classmates' projects too, just so that you can see how other people took that assignment and ran with it and what the choices that they decided to make on their project. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed looking at that. Last thing on updates, STC instructor evaluations are open. I think they just opened yesterday, and they usually leave them open for 2 or 3 weeks. So you should make your way to the evaluations website. You have to use your STC credentials to log in. You can click here. And I linked it, but it's also over here in the side navigation. You should have course evaluation. It is important to do them. I will tell you that your name is not associated with your commentary. I personally like to look at the feedback when I'm preparing the course again the next time that I teach it. I go back and look at the comments that students made or the ratings that you give, because I'm always thinking that I can be better. And especially in this virtual space, you know, we're all learning how to do it best. I know that it's not always optimum, but if we have to continue virtual learning, I can learn a lot from the feedback that students give me. And even if we weren't in virtual space, I learn a lot from that. So I do go and look at my evaluations to see, you know, like what students are saying about the course. But I want you to know that, you know, you don't have to, as an instructor, go back and look at your ratings. But I will tell you that the department chairs and the deans do, because every year we have an evaluation process where we have to go in and we have to meet with the department chair. Sometimes people have to meet with the dean. And they go through, it's kind of sort of performance evaluation. They go through your grades, they look at the assignments that you're giving, make sure that it's, you know, on the college level. They talk with you about a number of different things, but then they also talk to you about your evaluations. So they read them, they bring them up to the instructor. So if you have an instructor that you think is problematic, but it's not rising to the level where you want to go and say something and bring it up to that professor, I say, you know, put it in the evaluation. It is anonymous. I don't know who writes what or how people do the ratings, because there's a part where you do the ratings. So I think that that's a good way to start to get people at STC aware if there's a problem. I usually have pretty good evaluations, and they noted that in my last performance meeting. I mean, it doesn't mean that I can't improve. There's always a few things that I'm always working on. But do take time to do those evaluations, even if you don't do them all at one time. They do pay attention to them, and I know there were at least 2 people in the English department at STC in the dual enrollment from the high school that were discontinued from teaching the dual enrollment, because not just because of the commentary, there were other issues, but I know that that was a factor. So, you know, I don't want you to think that doing it's a waste of time is what I'm saying. I could have said that in one sentence. I realized that. English teachers are long-winded. It's just how we are. Anything else on updates? Is there anything that I'm forgetting to say that you know about? Okay. All right. Well, I do want to take some time today to go over and lecture a little bit on the notes that you were supposed to take on tragedy and comedy and defining drama. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes at the end of the class period getting you ready to read the first half of Oedipus Rex. Oedipus Rex, or Oedipus the King, is about 40 pages long in our textbook. It's chopped up with a few pictures here and there, but remember we talked last week about how the next 2 weeks are going to be kind of reading heavy, and I have some things that will support you on that. But we need to read the first half of Oedipus this week and the second half next week, so that when we get back from Thanksgiving, we can just work on the paper and the exam. So I want to get you ready for that a little bit and talk to you about our watch party that I'm going to host on Thursday. It's optional, but I want to talk about that too. If you call it a watch party, it sounds less like an assignment or a class and more like something fun. So hopefully it will be. All right, before we get to that though, let's do the notes for tragedy comedy. The reason that I always go over these is because I want to make sure that if you have questions, I mean, I know that you know how to read, but I do generally want to talk about the sections of the textbook, the informational sections that are assigned to you, because all of these terms are going to pop up on the exam that's coming up. So I want to make sure that I spent some time talking about them so you had an opportunity to add to your notes that you took when you were reading. I don't want to insult you that you know, I mean, I know that you can read and take notes, but this is your opportunity to get everything clarified. And so I do want to take a little bit of time to go through that. So when we talk about drama in general, there are 2 main categories, tragedy and comedy. There are a lot of subcategories, but if we go back to the ancient times, and if you watch the video about ancient Greek drama, they talk about this. And that's the idea that originally, plays originated in ancient Greece, and they did it because of a contest. There was a big, you know, event, and there would be playwrights who competed, and tragedy was sort of like the highest intellectual, artistic expression of playwriting, but comedies were kind of low level, humor that just appealed to the masses, but these tragedians would compete to see who had the best tragedy at this competition. So that's where we get the idea of tragedy and comedy being the big sort of breakdown in drama. But there are a lot of subcategories, especially now, because we're so far into the future from ancient times. The definition of tragedy is kind of vague because you could talk about a Greek tragedy, which like Oedipus Rex, or you could just talk about a tragedy in general. Shakespeare had tragedies, people still write tragic plays. But when we're talking about ancient Greece, we're talking about a specific type of tragedy, and we're going to get to that in a second. There is a term that you need to know called catharsis. This is a term that we use not just with drama, but it's a real life term too. You can impress your friends and your parents by using the word catharsis, but it's about having an emotional purging. It doesn't mean that something that's going to happen in the play is going to make you all of a sudden, you know, have emotions. It just means that a play, because of the Freytag's pyramid, a play sets up a conflict just like a novel or a short piece of fiction. And it's just that we're emotionally involved in it because it's unfolding in front of us. We can see the actors and their faces, and it's so much more visual. And so plays usually in the rising action really amp up the conflict and the complexity of the characters. And so by the time the climax happens, we really need that catharsis. We need, we're so anxious about what's going to happen that we need the release of emotions, even if it's negative, even if it's that the character died or is in some way disfigured or, has a tragic outcome. We are still having a relief of our emotions, and they call that catharsis. We can use that in real life too, like if you're trying to make a decision and it's really giving you a lot of anxiety and, you can't decide. Once you finally do decide, you can sometimes have a catharsis. I think a lot of people had a cathartic feeling on Saturday when we have been waiting for election results for a number of days, and it just kept getting more and more tense. And so that feeling when announcements are made and decisions are concluded kind of also creates a catharsis. So that's I like that there's some terms in drama that also appeal and we can use in real life. There are some that you can't. Okay, so then they talk about a couple of other Greek terms that have found their way into our discussion of tragedy. And that is hamartia, which is the fatal flaw of a character. The protagonist will have a fatal flaw. It won't necessarily be obvious at the beginning of the play, but the fatal flaw will cause their downfall. And it's meant to be sort of a warning for human beings. And so there's some flaw that creates their own demise. Whether it's they might not die, but it's definitely a downfall that they can't recover from. In many of the ancient Greek plays, the weakness is pride, like too much pride. Not like I'm proud of myself pride, but I'm better than you pride. And hubris is what that's called. That's a term that we use even in regular life. So hubris is the kind of pride where you're the greatest that ever was, and you are so blinded by your own pride that you don't see the downfall that is creating. And so we call that hubris. That happens in Romeo and Juliet. They mention that those two are so in love that they don't see how the dynamic between their two families could play out in a tragic way for them. So oftentimes the protagonist in a drama, in a tragedy, is blindsided because they don't recognize their own flaw. Irony, I think we've covered irony. They do add cosmic irony. I don't remember if we talked about that. I think I mentioned it, but it wasn't in the text. But cosmic irony does have a huge role in Oedipus Rex. So if you don't have that in your notes, then you should put it. Sometimes it's called irony of fate. And the idea is that some larger force, in the play it's going to be an oracle, it's going to be, you know, like a prophecy, because they're ancient people and that's their concept. But there's some larger entity that creates the pathway for people's lives. And I asked you about this on the formatives last week. And cosmic irony is when human beings discover that plan, but think in their arrogance or their hubris that they can overcome it. And in trying to avoid whatever their fate is, because usually in these ancient dramas, the person goes to the oracle and the oracle tells them, oh, you're going to end up, you know, killing your own son or whatever. Oh no, that's horrible. I'm going to do everything I can do not to do that. And so usually it's the actions that the characters take, ironically, to avoid the prophecy that ends up putting them right in the position of the prophecy occurring. So they talk a little bit about Oedipus there. There's a prophecy that he's going to kill his parents. And so they do stuff to help him to avoid that, but those steps lead directly to it happening. They talk about the catastrophe. There's that moment where the character's flaws become obvious to them and that the fact that they've had this downfall. Pathos, I don't think that's a new term for you. Probably you studied that last year. But it's about the suffering that exists and how the audience recognizes that suffering of the protagonist. I do think that if you don't have notes on Aristotle's Unities, which is at the bottom of this page, 1043, that you should definitely make notes on that. Aristotle, in his great work Poetics, came up with the idea of the three unities. Now, we don't subscribe to the three unities anymore because our idea of drama and tragedy has moved past Aristotle's idea and the ancient Greek idea of what theater can be. But the unities guided plays like the one that we're going to read. And so there are three unities: the unity of action, the unity of place, and the unity of time. The unity of time talks about how for a tragedy to seem realistic, all these unities are designed to make it seem like it could really happen. And so the unity of time is about how a play has to happen pretty much in real time. It needs to take no more than 1 day of time. Like you can jump forward a couple of hours, but you can't jump forward a couple of days, weeks, months, because that's not realistic. We obviously don't subscribe to that anymore because many of you have read plays or been to movies where time does pass in between the scenes. But for Aristotle and for the ancients like Sophocles, that would be one of the rules. The whole action has to play out almost in real time on the stage. Now that's why the play doesn't have much action, because if something is being realized or if information is being gathered, not all that happens at once. So, you know, if you're going to tell a story that started when Oedipus was a baby and now he's the king of Thebes, obviously that's not 1 day. And so it wouldn't subscribe to the rule of unities. So it all takes place as he's older, and he has to go and find these witnesses and these people from the past who can tell him parts of this story so that he can piece things together. So it's not an action-oriented type thing, these ancient Greek dramas. I don't think that means stop. I don't know what that means. Okay, so the other two unities. Then there's the unity of action. The unity of action means that everything that's going on in the play happens to further the outcome. In other words, plot, right? Everything, there's no event that occurs or character that's present that doesn't help us get to the action of the play. Nothing is extra or able to be sacrificed. Unity of place means that the story takes place and unfolds all in one location. In Oedipus Rex, the location is the steps outside of the king's mansion, Oedipus Palace. And the people of Thebes are there, the chorus will be there, and a lot of the action and dialogue will take place there. But there's no concept in ancient Greek theater of, you know, like a set that rotates or curtains that close and it opens on something else, like some other building or something. They don't have that. This predates all of that. So they don't even really use props or sets. Usually there's just columns or boxes or something like that. So those are the three unities. And for Aristotle and the ancients, those were hard and fast rules to make it seem realistic, but they've broken that since then. They talk about tragicomedies, which is pretty obvious what that is. They talk about melodramas. If you've ever seen a Mexican novella, you know what a melodrama is. I want to get to realism and naturalism because sometimes people get confused between the difference of those. So these are concepts in the 19th century, and realism is like sort of the idea that a play is like a slice of life, right? Like I'm just taking a few moments of this person's lifetime and dramatizing it on stage, this character. And so the audience recognizes the same kinds of problems that they have in the characters. In Shakespeare's time, in Sophocles' time, we don't see those problems as problems that we would have. I mean, we don't have Oedipus problem. I mean, I hope you don't have Oedipus problem. You know, in the Shakespearean plays, we don't have those kinds of problems in real life. So realism kind of says, you know what, let's make sure that the audience can see the problems of regular people in the play. Maybe it will seem more poignant to them. Similar to that, at the bottom of the page, they talk about naturalism. So naturalism is sort of like looking at slice of life, but also making observations about what they call the human condition. The human condition is an existential idea that is about, if we have to live, how do we choose to live? And it's asking a question like that. So naturalism is about, yes, it's about the actions on stage, but it's also about the actions on stage representing all humans in their pursuit of whatever it is that they're looking for. So those two are different slightly. Anything on that section in tragedy that you want me to talk about? In more depth, anything? Did I skip any terms? I don't think I did. All right, commedia. That's the commedia mask. Usually you see tragedy and commedia next to each other. So a comedy is not necessarily a hilarious play. A comedy is, back in ancient times, kind of gross. As these tragedians were presenting their art on stage, you know, in the form of human suffering and tragedy, there were also comedic writers, and comedy for the ancient Greeks was way, way lower on the scale than tragedy. Comedy usually had to do with, you know, some pervert or like, you know, two characters that are trying to get together, but they can't. It's not hilarious all the way through. It's usually just that the characters have minor flaws that are kind of unseemly and exaggerated. So they talk about that. Lots of times there's, you know, like body humor jokes and people grabbing people and stuff like that. They go through a few different comedies. They do distinguish in the chapter between old comedy and new comedy. So it's kind of good to make a distinction also in your mind. Old comedy is the kind that I was just describing. You know, people grabbing, people trying to hook up, people doing, you know, kind of body humor. New comedy in more modern times is often about romance or, you know, sort of like the complexities of two people finding love. And ultimately it ends with them getting married because it has more of a happy ending type thing. Satire, probably you studied that last year as well. Satire is intellectual humor for the purpose of enlightenment. You're supposed to learn something about human condition from satire. It's sort of like hashtag funny, not funny, right? Like there's something that's funny, but when you think about the real situation, it's not funny. It's a real thing. So satire is used to highlight what's wrong with society by making it funny. Key and Peele is probably my favorite satirical comedy group. Most of their stuff is not appropriate for school, but maybe you know the skit where there's a substitute teacher. That one's pretty famous. And that's making fun of specific assumptions that different racial groups make about names. And that is a serious issue. Farce is just, you know, like a slapstick type comedy. Romantic comedy, that's obvious. Comedy of humors, they describe that here, but it's from the Renaissance. The Renaissance people didn't have an idea about physiology. They didn't understand about bones and organs and blood and germs. And so they believed that every human being has 4 humors like swirling around as fluids in their body. And when those fluids are equal, then they're in harmony. But when one is dominant, then there's a problem. And that creates whatever health problem that they have. That's where bloodletting came in and all of that stuff. Too much blood humor, you have to get it out. Which, if somebody's sick, that you should not take out their blood. That's not going to be good. We know that now. So the comedy of humors is about how they tried to describe what it's like if you're a person who has too much of the blood humor or the bile humor or, you know, the phlegm humor. They named the humors after the different fluids that they could observe about the human body. I mean, if a person's body gives off urine and blood and, you know, like phlegm, if you didn't know about the human body, you might assume that that's what's inside of you just swirling around, waiting to come out. And so that's what they believed. And each one was associated with a different personality trait. Oh, that's weird. Comedy of manners, that has to do with status and the caste system. And comedy of manners is sort of about you know, how high society has its way of doing things and it's very different from lower society and that kind of differential. Sentimental comedy, that's obvious. High comedy and low comedy, I already talked about that a little bit, but high comedy is intellectual comedy like satire, and low comedy is, you know, like fart jokes. And it's not that Shakespeare doesn't have low comedy, because he does. It's just that it's not the main point of the play. Talk about anti-heroes, which is a character that has the qualities of not a hero, but sort of not a villain as much as a hindrance to society. So an anti-hero, one that I can think about is, if you've ever seen Despicable Me, that character Gru is an anti-hero. He's adopting these kids. He's not too sure about it at first, right? But he eventually, he's also trying to, I don't know, blow up the moon or harness the moon or something for evil purposes. So there's not pure reason why he's doing what he's doing, and we call that an anti-hero. Black or dark comedies, they have a good description of that. Theater of the absurd is just weird to me. I never really warmed to theater of the absurd. I know that it makes sense to some people, but it doesn't make sense to me. It's where a playwright on purpose is trying to discuss the human condition, but it is, you know, kind of, you know, off and offbeat. The most famous is probably Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, where Tom Stoppard imagines that what's happening to 2 minor characters during Hamlet. They only come on stage a few times, so the rest of the time the play is focused on them, but they don't do anything. They sort of like, you know, clip their toenails and eat apples while they're waiting for their part to go on stage. I'd rather just watch Hamlet, but that's theater of the observed. Defining drama, I think that you've got a lot of things that are pretty obvious there. Do make sure that you know stage directions. There was a diagram to help you with that in your stuff for today. Asides are important. An aside is like when a character breaks the fourth wall to talk to the audience, like that. A soliloquy is similar, but a soliloquy is when the character's alone on stage and sort of running you through their thoughts. They talk about, what else am I missing? The brute, okay, they talk about that. Farce. All right, that's pretty much it. That's a lot of pages, but I just wanted to run through those terms. And are there any questions? Are there any that I skipped or any that you want me to go into more depth about? No? Okay. Heading back over to the notes for today, you should have also looked at the stage directions diagram. No questions. Okay, Sean. This diagram is sort of important. I had to kick out some of the assignments that I would normally do if we were here in class, just because it's not easy to translate to the virtual situation. But lots of times we do a sort of hands-on workshop type thing with stage directions when we're talking about plays, because actors block out all of their locations in movies and plays and everything. They already know where they're walking. The director has already told them, here you're going to walk, you know, downstage left and sit in this chair. All of that gets worked out in a drama, and there are terms for the different locations on stage. So if you didn't know that, I just wanted you to be aware of it. Lots of times plays will actually have in parentheses stage directions that say actor returns to center stage, or also they use these diagrams to help them plan out the furniture or the other features that are going to be on stage. But notice that it's from the actor's perspective. So if you're standing here at center stage, looking out to the audience, the area over to your left is called stage left. The audience, it looks like it's the right-hand side, but it's all oriented toward the actor because they're the ones that are moving through the space with those names. So that's a good thing to note. Sometimes I do an activity where I ask you to take a scene from the play that we're reading and block it, so that you can say on what line does the actor walk across over here, and what's your reasoning for them to walk over here and stare into space or whatever. But just an awareness is all you need for that. Also, there was a video on Introduction to Greek Drama. I like that video a lot. I feel like it's succinct. It didn't add a bunch of stuff or make it longer than it needed to be, but it had a lot of good information. Is there any question from the video? Sean? He's gonna say no questions. We already did. It's hard to know if there's no questions just because you just want me to get finished and stop lecturing, or if I'm doing such a great job that there's no question. I think it's probably the first one. All right, so your assignment is going to read, let me go through the assignments and then we'll go back and look at the beginning section of Oedipus Rex, because I want to pronounce some characters for you. Some of the characters' names are a little weird, and I don't want you to, when you're reading it, to start reading it with the pronunciation in mind, and then you have to change it when you start watching the video and you realize that's not how it's pronounced. So I'm going to go back and pronounce some of the characters for you. But the assignment really is just to read Oedipus Rex, the first half, which is about 23 pages. And then, now it's written in poetic form. Hold on, let me get it. 1430, right? So it's not like you have to read straight across. So, I mean, the pages, you probably looked at this already, have a lot of blank space on the side. So I know 23 pages sounds like a lot, and it is because we're trying to get half the play done this week, but I have some tools to help you. And it's not as hard as you might think. It's a good translation. But besides reading it, I also want you to watch the first half of one of the 2 videos I've selected that depict Oedipus Rex. So the first step is to read it, and down here you can see that you have your textbook and it's there. I also made a PDF. I couldn't find a good quality PDF, or really any PDF of this translation online, so I just made a PDF from the pages. It's not optimal, but it's readable. So that's here for you if that helps you. And then there are 2 other things that will help you as you read. And these are not assignments. These are tools to help you be successful in your reading. So one of them is the structure chart that I showed you last time. You can download this, and I've already put in the different sections of the play. Last time I was talking about the difference between episodes and stasimons and what the komos is and the exodos and all that stuff. So there's notes from last time on all of this. And then I put the pages where that exists in the textbook, and space for you to put in key characters and keep track of what's happening in the plot. You do not have to use this, but I do think that it will help you as you read to keep characters and plot organized. Plus, I think it would be a good thing to study once it's completed when we get ready to do some of the, the exam and other things at the end of the term. So I'm not collecting it, you don't turn it in. It's like for an organized way for you to do notes if you should choose to. So that's there. You can download a copy of that and customize it to your heart's content. The other thing that I created for you is a little brief study guide. I'm not a big fan of asking a bunch of questions when we're reading. I feel like that takes away from the time that it takes to read, and reading something like Oedipus Rex takes a lot of concentration. It's an old piece, it's classic. And I would rather that you spent the time reading and understanding than answering questions. What I find happens is if people are too focused on the questions for a grade, they spend more time answering the questions than they ever did reading the assignment. And for me, the reading is the most important thing. So what I did was I made the second tool to help you is a little list of something to focus on for each section of the play that you'll be reading. For this week, you're going to read, I think, to the second stasimon, and it's about half of the play. And what did I put over here? Right before stasimon 2. So you're going to read to this komos right here. So that's going to be 1431 to 1453. And that's about half of the play. The other half will be the assignment for next week. But this little study guide is, again, it says right at the top, you do not need to write out answers to these questions. If you want to, go ahead. They're to help you focus. So as you're reading, you have one or a couple places, 2 things to help you focus on the important things of that section. You should always look up unfamiliar words. You should look up allusions. If they're referencing something, you don't know what it is. If you don't know who Apollo is, they're going to talk about that. Then you have to, get on Wikipedia and inform yourself and then go back to reading. There are footnotes. They're not continuous, but there are some good, solid footnotes in the text. Read them, apply them. There'll be a little, number next to a word. You have to go down and read the footnote. It will give you some background and then go back up with the knowledge of that section. So you can see that there's a little study questions for each section, and then at the end we'll worry about that stuff next week. But those 2 things I'm hoping together will help you do well in your reading without being distracted by having to do assignments that are associated with that. Hopefully that makes sense. So read it and then watch a stage production. There are 2 options. You can watch the 1957 stage production, or you can watch the 2018 stage production. They differ. And the reason that I chose them is because they differ. The 1957 stage production is pretty close to the text. It uses the traditional masks that we talked about last time in class, and has a more ancient feel to it, like the way that it might have actually been performed on stage. It's a recording of a stage production. The 2018 version is also a recording of a stage production, but they do not wear masks, and the text is a little bit easier. So if when you're reading, these aren't substitutes for reading the text, but they're supplements to help you with the text. So if when you're reading it's tough for you, then you might choose the 2018 version to watch. If you think it'd be cool to see something similar to how it would have been acted out, I mean, you're not on a Greek theater stage, but something with the masks and how that works, then you choose the 1957. If you want to read that and watch the video on your own, then that's fine. You have the links there. You're only watching the first half. Only watch as much of the video as you read. I'm going to have a watch party on Thursday. I'm going to have 3 different ones. And you can join any one that you want. One at each one of the class periods. I have 3 dual classes on B days, first period, second period, third period. So this is optional. You don't have to come and do this. You can watch them on your own. You do need to watch one of the videos. But I'll leave it up to you whether you want to come, and I'll play it on the screen. We can chat in the chat about it. I might stop it a couple times just to talk about what's going on and clarify things for you. Bring your breakfast, bring your snack, and we can watch the performance. You can come at 8 o'clock, or you can come at 11:45, or you can come at our normal class time. Any of those times works. There is a different Zoom link. I put it down here because I want any of the classes to be able to come at whatever time they would like. I made a different Zoom, so it's not the usual class meeting on Thursday. But I just want to make it clear that's optional. You still need to do your formative that day and all that jazz, but I just think it might be more interesting to watch the video together like we would if we were in the classroom. If we were in the classroom, after you read what you're supposed to read, we would sit and watch it together and chit chat about it while we're watching. So I'm hoping that we can recreate that with this watch party on Thursday. Hopefully some people show up. But even if you don't come to the watch party, you still have the links there. The 1957 is in my Google Drive. The 2018 is on YouTube. Questions on that? So there's nothing to turn in this week, really, except the formatives. All right, last thing I want to do is go over the characters. You should have already read them, because you're supposed to read the Dramatis Personae and, like this background on Sophocles and stuff for today. But when you're reading, you should read the majority of it before Thursday if you're going to come to the watch party. Don't come to the watch party without having read, because I'm not going to stop that frequently to explain everything that's happening to you, and you might get confused. But I do want to talk about some of the characters so that it sets you off on a good footing when you're reading, plus pronunciation of their names, because they have some weird names. Oedipus, we've already been talking about him. British people call him Oedipus. That's okay. It sounds a little weird in American English, but whatever. We'll say Oedipus. And priest of Zeus, that's nothing. It's hard to pronounce. Okay, then there's Creon. Creon is Oedipus' brother-in-law. Oedipus is married to a woman named Jocasta, and Creon is her brother. So Creon, not crayon, like somebody wrote on their test once. Creon. I will try to say it like that, Creon, so it doesn't sound like crayon, but sometimes when you're talking about stuff, people hear different things, but Creon is his name. Chorus and Caragus, we already talked about those. Then in the second column, you have Tiresias. Tiresias is a prophet, and he's key in the story to helping Oedipus answer some important questions that he has to answer as king of Thebes. Oedipus is the king, and he's got some questionable origins that they're trying to discover throughout the play. And Tiresias is a prophet. Most prophets were blind at this time, because the idea was if they're missing one of their senses, then their other senses are heightened to make up for it. So Tiresias is a blind seer. He comes out in other works of Greek literature. He comes out in the Odyssey and a few other things. He's not real, he's a character. Jocasta is the wife of Oedipus. Sometimes you see her name spelled with an I instead of a J, which is a little bit more Greek. Sometimes you'll see Epikaste, Epikaste, different pronunciations and different spellings of her name, but this version goes with Jocasta, so that's how you pronounce that. Herdsman system. Okay. At the bottom under mutes, where the mutes are, those are characters that exist on the stage, but they don't have any lines. So you have to imagine them standing there while the other characters are talking. All of those, I think, the suppliants, the attendants, the servants, those are pretty obvious. But Antigone and Ismene are two characters at the end that I wanted to pronounce for you. Antigone and Ismene are Oedipus and Jocasta's daughters. And although they don't have any lines in this particular play, the Oedipus cycle is a 3-play grouping. Oedipus the king is the first one, but there's also Oedipus at Colonus and a play called Antigone, which is about Oedipus' daughter. She's the protagonist in that play. Also in the bottom down here in the footnote, it's going to pop up when you're reading, but they're going to talk about another character, Laius, who is Oedipus' father, his birth father, because certain things are revealed in the play that make it obvious that he's not who he thought he was. All right, so then after that, they talk about the setting and how the Thebans at the beginning of the play, you have to read this stuff because it sets up the, you know, sort of the exposition at the beginning. The scene is always the palace in front of the palace at Thebes, and so that Oedipus can come in and out of his palace and address the Thebans and the different people that are coming by to talk to him through the day. And so the suppliants are the poor people. We would call them beggars now, I guess. And they are coming to Oedipus' palace to say that they're dying. They're having a lot of trouble. And Oedipus comes out to greet them to find out what's going on. And he is seeking to solve that for his people of Thebes. You can see an image there of him coming out and pointing dramatically. That's an even older version of the play. And so then begins the prologue, which you should have a section for over on this chart if you decide to use it. So hopefully that sets you up to do a good job reading the play. I know that was a lot of me talking. Are there any questions that you have about what needs to happen this week, or the watch party, or the play in general? Okay.
No questions.
Oh, okay. What is it?
I said no questions.
Oh, I just heard question. I always wait a little bit longer than it seems. And I know it gets a little awkward, but every time I'm in a meeting, these people that run these meetings sometimes, these people, you know, like administrators, whoever, they'll say, are there any questions? Okay, no questions, moving on. And like, I haven't even unmuted myself and we're already moving on. It's sort of like saying, are there any questions? But they don't really want any questions. So, but I really do want to answer questions for you if you have them. So. All right, so focus this week on reading, taking your time. You might not be able to read it all in one sitting. You might have to reread parts. This is high-level, advanced academic reading. So do your very best. If you have questions, if you're struggling with it, contact me. Or show up at the watch party, because we're going to watch the 1957 stage version. I like it better because it's got the masks, but you'll also get me kind of like putting in some commentary and helping you through some things. And in the chat, you can ask questions and we can respond to each other while we're watching. So that might help you too if you start reading and have trouble. But I don't expect that you will. You're just going to have to work through it, you know, methodically. All right. All right, well, hopefully I'll see some of you on Thursday for the watch party, or one of the times for the watch party. And other than that, I will see you next Tuesday. We'll talk about the first half of Oedipus Rex. Have a good day, everybody. Enjoy your week.